Camaro Z28 versus Mustang Boss 302, the ultimate Trans Am battle. Two engines, both legends, both built for one purpose: to destroy each other on America's racetracks every single weekend. This wasn't just about selling cars. This was about corporate pride, racing supremacy, and proving which company really understood what performance meant. You heard the stories from guys who were there. The screaming battles at Riverside, Laguna Seca, and Road America. Chevrolet's Z28 dominating the early years. Then Ford firing back with the Boss 302 that changed everything. Every weekend was war, and every race was a battle for the soul of American motorsports. Tonight, we're settling the greatest rivalry in muscle car history: the Camaro Z28 versus the Mustang Boss 302. The precision instrument against the racing scalpel. Chevy engineering versus Ford Fury. But here's what'll blow your mind. One of these cars was so advanced that its engine technology is still being used in NASCAR today. And wait until you hear about the secret testing sessions where these two met head-to-head with nobody watching except the engineers who built them. So, fire up some Credence, grab your favorite cold one, and let's dive into the racing war that gave us two of the greatest muscle cars ever built. This isn't just about horsepower. This is about what happens when corporate giants go to war. The stage, Trans Am racing madness. Picture this: 1967. Trans Am racing was the hottest thing in American motorsports. Manufacturers had to build real street cars to go racing. And suddenly, every gearhead in America could buy a legitimate race car with license plates. The rules were simple but brutal. Under 305 cubic inches, production-based, and ready to run wheel-to-wheel at 150 miles per hour on tracks that would make today's safety inspectors faint. This wasn't for the faint of heart. This was automotive gladiator combat. Chevrolet jumped in first with the Z28, a Camaro so focused on winning races that comfort was basically an afterthought. They took the best parts from their racing program and stuffed them into a street car that looked civilized but drove like a caged animal. Ford watched Chevrolet dominate the early Trans Am seasons and got mad, really mad. When Ford gets mad, they don't just build a competitor, they build a weapon. Enter the Boss 302, named after the racing series it was designed to demolish. These weren't just muscle cars anymore. They were corporate statements wrapped in steel and rubber, carrying the pride of two companies that refused to accept second place. The contenders, meet your warriors. In the Chevrolet corner, the 1969 Z28. This wasn't your typical big block muscle car. While everyone else was stuffing huge engines into heavy bodies, Chevrolet went a different direction. They built a small block that could rev to the moon and wrapped it in a package that could actually turn corners. That 302 cubic inch engine was a masterpiece of engineering violence. Solid lifter cam, forged internals, and an appetite for high octane that would make your wallet cry. But when you hit 6,000 RPM, it transformed into something that sounded like mechanical thunder mixed with pure racing fury. The Z28 package meant your Camaro could go from grocery store parking lot to racetrack without missing a beat. Racing stripes weren't decoration. They were warnings. This was a street car that happened to be a race car, or maybe it was the other way around. In the Ford corner, the 1969 Boss 302. If the Z28 was Chevrolet's precision instrument, the Boss 302 was Ford's declaration of war. They took everything they'd learned getting beaten by Chevrolet and built a Mustang specifically designed for revenge. That Boss 302 engine wasn't just powerful, it was angry. Ford's racing engineers had massaged every component until it could produce race-winning power while still starting every morning and driving to work. The result was an engine that pulled hard from idle and kept pulling until your courage ran out. The Boss 302 attracted drivers who wanted everyone to know they'd chosen the weapon specifically designed to beat Chevrolet. This wasn't just transportation. This was automotive patriotism wrapped in Ford racing fury. But the real battle wasn't happening in showrooms. It was happening every weekend on racetracks where legends were born. Racing reality, where champions were made. Trans Am racing was brutal. These cars would run flat out for hours, fighting for every tenth of a second around tracks that demanded everything from driver and machine. This wasn't drag racing where you could hide problems behind straight-line speed. This was road racing where every weakness got exposed. The early Z28s dominated because Chevrolet understood something Ford was still learning. Road racing was about the total package: power, handling, braking, reliability. Everything had to work together perfectly, or you'd be watching your competitors disappear into the distance. Mark Donohue in the Z28 was virtually unbeatable in 1968 and early 1969. That Camaro would stick to the track like it was glued down, and when Donohue hit the throttle coming out of corners, that 302 small block would pull like a freight train with racing ambitions. But Ford was learning. Every race where they got beaten taught them something new about what it took to win. When the Boss 302 finally showed up at the tracks, it carried lessons learned from every defeat and the fury of a company that was tired of finishing second. Parnelli Jones and George Falmer in the Boss 302 Mustangs weren't just racing. They were on a mission to prove that Ford could build anything Chevrolet could build, only better. Those Mustangs would dive into corners where other cars would push straight into the weeds. The racing battles were so intense that drivers from both camps developed a mutual respect that bordered on religious. They knew they were pushing machines that represented the absolute best each company could build. Street truth. The real-world showdown. But what really mattered to guys like us was how these racing weapons performed when the lights turned green on Friday night. Strip away the racing glory and marketing hype. Which car would make you king of your local scene? The Z28 was the thinking man's muscle car. That 302 small block didn't hit you with massive torque like a big block, but it rewarded skill and courage. Learn to keep it on the cam, and you'd embarrass cars with twice the displacement. Everything about the Z28 felt connected. The steering, brakes, suspension. When you drove it hard, you understood why Donohue could make it dance around road courses. This was a total performance package that happened to have license plates. The Z28 attracted drivers who understood that real performance came from harmony between all the systems. You couldn't just mash the gas and hope for the best. You had to earn every bit of speed this car would give you. The Boss 302 had different priorities. Where the Z28 was sophisticated, the Boss was direct. That engine delivered power in a way that felt more immediate, more urgent. When you stood on the throttle, things happened right now. Ford had built the Boss 302 for drivers who wanted their performance delivered with attitude. Those functional hood scoops weren't just for show, and when that engine opened up, everyone within 3 blocks knew something special was happening. The Boss 302 was the car for drivers who wanted to make a statement about choosing the weapon specifically designed to beat Chevrolet. Every acceleration was a declaration that you joined Ford's war against the Bowtie Army. Coming up next, the head-to-head battle that settled this debate once and for all. The ultimate test. When legends collided. Summer 1969. Riverside Raceway. After the official Trans Am race was over and the crowds had gone home, something happened that most people never heard about. A Z28 and Boss 302, both prepped by their factory teams, lined up for a private test session that would determine which car really had the edge. No spectators, no prize money, just 2 teams of engineers with something to prove, and 2 drivers who lived for moments like this. The kind of test where you discover which car could really deliver when everything was on the line. The Z28 got the whole shot, that small block screaming toward the first turn like it was trying to tear itself apart. But the Boss 302 was right there, hanging on through the S's and looking for an opportunity to prove Ford's engineering was superior. Through the technical sections, both cars were so evenly matched that the drivers had to dig deeper than they'd ever gone before. This wasn't about the cars anymore. This was about which machine would give its driver that extra tenth of a second needed for victory. Down the back straight, the Boss 302 pulled alongside. Those Ford engineers had built something that could match Chevrolet's best effort, and everyone watching knew they were seeing history being written in tire smoke and racing fuel. At the checkered flag, the margin was less than a car length. But what mattered wasn't who crossed the line first. It was that both cars had proven they belonged in a category all by themselves. The technical truth: what made them special. Let's talk about what really separated these engines from everything else Detroit was building. Both companies threw their best engineering talent at creating 302 cubic inch masterpieces, but they took completely different approaches. The Chevrolet 302 was built like a racing engine that happened to be street legal. Forged steel crank, solid lifter cam, and cylinder heads that flowed air like they were designed in a wind tunnel. When you revved it past 6,000 RPM, it kept pulling like it was just getting started. Chevrolet had learned from their small block racing program that displacement wasn't everything. Build an engine that could rev freely and breathe efficiently, and you could embarrass big blocks that relied on brute force alone. The Ford 302 Boss was different. Ford took their Windsor small block and gave it the full racing treatment, but with an emphasis on delivering power across a broader RPM range. Those massive Cleveland heads moved serious air, and the result was an engine that pulled hard everywhere. Ford's approach was to build an engine that delivered race-winning performance without requiring a PhD in engine management. Point it in a direction, stand on the throttle, and let Ford engineering do the rest. Both engines shared one critical advantage. They were light enough to let their cars handle like proper sports cars instead of straight-line missiles. This was the secret that separated them from every other muscle car on the street. The impact that never ended. Here's something that'll blow your mind. The technology developed for these Trans Am warriors is still winning races today. NASCAR teams study the cylinder head designs, drag racers copy the bottom-end combinations, and road racers still try to recreate the suspension setups. The Z28 proved that Chevrolet could build small blocks that would rev to the moon without self-destructing. Every LS engine that powers today's Camaros and Corvettes traces its DNA back to those original Trans Am 302s. The Boss 302 showed Ford how to build engines that delivered massive power without sacrificing reliability. When Ford needed to create the Coyote engines for modern Mustangs, they went back to study what made the Boss 302 so special. But the real legacy isn't technical, it's emotional. These cars taught an entire generation that American manufacturers could build sophisticated performance machines that didn't have to choose between power and handling. Every kid who saw a Z28 or Boss 302 on the street learned that muscle cars could be precision instruments instead of just powerful bruisers. They expanded what it meant to be a performance car in America. The verdict: which warrior won? So after all the racing, testing, and street battles, which car really deserves the crown? The honest truth is that both the Z28 and Boss 302 achieved something more important than outright victory. They achieved automotive immortality. The Z28 was the more sophisticated machine, the car that rewarded skill and delivered performance through precision engineering. It attracted drivers who understood that real speed came from harmony between all the systems working together. The Boss 302 was the more direct weapon, the car that delivered its performance with attitude and made sure everyone knew you'd chosen the Ford specifically built to beat Chevrolet. It was for drivers who wanted their rebellion served with a side of racing pedigree. In the end, maybe the real victory was that both companies pushed each other to create machines that were better than either could have built alone. The Z28 made Ford build the Boss 302, and the Boss 302 made Chevrolet perfect the Z28. These weren't just cars. They were proof that when American manufacturers really tried, they could build anything the world could throw at them. They were rolling demonstrations that performance, handling, and style didn't have to be mutually exclusive. The Z28 versus Boss 302. Two approaches to the same goal. Two philosophies about what performance should mean, and two cars that proved American engineering could create sophistication without sacrificing soul. Whether you're Team Chevrolet or Team Ford, you have to respect what both companies achieved during those Trans Am wars. They gave us cars that could win races on Sunday and drive to work on Monday. Machines that expanded what we thought possible from Detroit iron. Which side of this battle captures your heart? Are you a Z28 precision believer, or does the Boss 302's direct assault approach speak to your soul? Let us know in the comments. And don't be surprised if this starts some serious debates. If this racing rivalry brought back some high-octane memories, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Next week, we're diving into another automotive showdown that'll get your blood pumping. Thanks for riding along through the greatest corporate war ever fought on American racetracks. Sometimes the best victories come when both sides refuse to accept anything less than perfection.